folks. Welcome to Project Gamma. At Project Gamma, we have smart conversations with smart people across entrepreneurship, technology, and cybersecurity. My name is Warner Moore. I'm a technologist and security leader who helped build multiple business-to-business software as a service companies who's passionate about modern cybersecurity practices. I'm also the founder of Gamma Force. At Gamma Force, we help tech and health tech companies with cybersecurity strategy through acting as our client's fractional security organization. I'm super excited today to have Anthony Spiteri with us, the co-founder and CTO of battleface, an insuretech company where he's leading the tech organization that's driving competitive advantage in insurance. So really cool story about battleface. Anthony originally founded battleface, and they were providing travel insurance for people who couldn't get it in high-risk areas, particularly journalists and missionaries. Can you tell us more about the problem you were trying to solve?
Sure. So at the time, and thanks for having me, Warner. At the time, we were actually a group of companies that were providing insurance services, and we were dealing a lot with claims in these high risk areas. So think of this is like 2010 to 2012, where it's post Afghanistan war, post Iraq, and we're working a lot with journalists and with other people who are traveling to the area. And one of the complaints they constantly had was it was impossible to get travel insurance and to get any kind of coverage for themselves, their equipment. Obviously the risk is very high, so it would take a very kind of niche product to be able to provide that kind of coverage. And that's where Battleface was born out of. And, hence the name and kind of it was definitely a niche market that we approached. But yeah, kind of that was the goal, and it's where we started out of.
Hmm, that's cool. I didn't make the connection between the name and your origin story. One of the neat things about Battleface too, and what originally helped some of your early growth is this thing called an FDCO or FCDO exemption.
Yep.
And from what I understand, you were among the few who could sell insurance during the pandemic. Tell us more about your early growth.
So that was actually both cool and terrifying at the same time. Because of this exemption, basically what happens is you get a list of countries you shouldn't travel to. And traditional companies will tell you, look, FCDO is telling you not to travel there in the UK, and you shouldn't go. And if you do, we can't provide coverage. So we had an exemption for this, and we were able to provide coverage for people going to these areas. And basically, when COVID hit, it just listed every country in the world. And if anybody wanted to go outside of the UK or their home country, we were able to provide coverage for them anyway. And this provided a really unique solution to travelers at the time. And we went from, basically the sales we would have over a week were happening in minutes. And it was super exciting and it was super high growth. And it really helped kind of springboard us to where we are today.
It's interesting. We had a guest in our last episode where we were talking about some of their growth that tied to the pandemic as well. And they had some really interesting technology problems that they had to solve. When you had that sudden growth, where were the bottlenecks in the business? Was it tech or operations, or what did you have to do?
Everywhere. It was all hands on deck. From a tech perspective, obviously, servers and hosting was a big concern. We really never had, we had obviously stress test and prepared but there's nothing that prepares you for the real life scenario. Overall, we did pretty well though. From an operations perspective, there was a lot of people who spent very long hours that, we can't thank enough to make sure that we continue to provide a high level of service. But yeah, we were tested on all fronts. It was almost unexpected. I think it was like an article in one of the journals over there, one of the newspapers that kind of really, really spearheaded the sudden burst of traffic and sales. So yeah, it was all the things being, right place, right time. Kind of, I think it's the common startup thing, right? It's you have to be a little lucky all the time too. So yeah.
Yeah, created luck, right? Had you not been solving that problem in the first place, the opportunity wouldn't have been there for you.
Yep.
Trying to solve it retroactively after pandemic probably wouldn't have worked so well.
Yeah, it took us a couple of months to get to where we were at the time, if not a year or so. So we didn't kind of just fall into it. I think we get to say we were well prepared, and the system we had built was able to adjust and making rating changes and things like that, and being able to correctly price and make sure we were assessing the risk correctly was also a big part of it.
So with that pop and quick growth, all the things you did to improve the business, technology, and otherwise during that time, was
Mhm.
that the new normal? And then you had a healthier pace of growth? What did that evolution look like?
So it was up and down. Once we had gone through that, it's when we got into our Series A, right? And then we were actually scaling people wise, which was a big change for us. We were a very small team, and suddenly we were not just 10 or 12 or so. We're growing pretty rapidly, and with that, there's growing pains. There's because you can't just throw, for example, engineers at a problem and tell them to build things. They've got to understand it. You've got to have your current engineers training the new engineers while still building new things, right? So it wasn't without its problems, but from a sales perspective, once COVID started to die down, we had to diversify. So we did go into more retail products, and
Mm.
we got into, especially like in the US, we got into what we call modular insurance. That's where you're able to like pick and choose your coverage, and you don't have to buy this pre-packaged kind of lump insurance product that you might not need. So, if you're driving down, you're going to go drive to see family, or you're, taking a short flight without any luggage. You don't need luggage coverage. You don't need, healthcare or anything like that because it's domestic. So you're able to choose things like trip cancellation, only what's specific to your trip. And I think that also helped the growth in the US. And, now we have a pretty good foothold here too.
Hmm. Cool, cool. Yeah, I think I've done some work in insuretech too. So when I hear insurance and product, it makes sense to me. There are risk models and actuary work that goes behind every product and risk that's underwritten. So those
Yep.
things are products, right? And as a customer, we might just go to a website and be like, click a button, buy a thing, and not think of it that way. So
Yep.
the figuring out how to write each risk individually and then have somebody like me just go and buy it, that's pretty cool. And from what I understand at battleface, and the work you're doing in your team, you've built these the technology to not only enable the management of those products but use technology to drive competitive advantage in your industry. Tell us more about that.
So we've gotten really into being a global and diverse company. So, and I mean that from an insurance perspective at the moment. So what I mean is we're able to really quickly build new insurance products, and it was one of the things that we identified quickly that it's going to be an issue because when we were partnering with specific third parties, or we're going into a new region, we realized we had to kind of build these products in a way where they were targeted, right? Where they're fitting the demographic you're selling to. And this process was a long process. You're doing all the actuarial and underwriting work, but then on top of it, you're doing all the engineering work as well. And the engineering work it involves everything from the rating to all the rules that are required, state and country specific things, taxation, specific documentation that has to be provided. So what we got into was we built what we called our no code product builder, right? So this took an 8 to 12 week process of creating these products in our system. And it turned it into basically a couple of hours or at most a day or two, right? Where you're able to go in a non-engineering resource, because even just the cost of it, then it's going to be really hard to get that ROI on the insurance product if you have 6, 7 engineers working on this for 3, 4 months or 2, 3 months, right? So now a non-technical person can go in, get all the information from the underwriting department, or it can be the underwriters themselves, and they can go in and build these products. And once the product is built, it's immediately available through API. So these integrations were super quick, super easy. Our partners love the flexibility because we can quickly change things, add benefits, or add packages and remove packages. So it gave us a huge advantage for speed to market and the ability to customize for our partners.
It's really interesting. And some of those technical problems I think are unique to insurance. I remember some of my past team members who would the tedium in these spreadsheets with the question trees and then trying to translate that logic to application logic. Not
Yep.
novel.
Yeah. We've gone through many iterations to get to where we are. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand the complications that there are behind insurance products in any line of insurance, really. There's a lot that goes into it.
Hmm, cool. So you essentially created, do a lot more in the U.S. market now for travel insurance. Is still a big part of your market international as well, or is it split pretty evenly?
So I'd say our key markets are probably the US, UK, and EU and Australia right now. We've actually had a lot of growth in Australia,
Hmm.
which has been fantastic. We've got a really great team out there, and the growth has been out of this world. I think there was a lot of companies that exited the market post-COVID, and we actually do mostly B2B to C over there. So, it's mostly embedded through API. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's an even split yet. The US is probably still our biggest market at the moment, but the other regions internationally are definitely growing. And we continue to grow into other countries where we see opportunity, like Canada's coming up. We
Do
already
you
sell some stuff in Canada, but not where we want to be yet.
do you keep your branding with the B2B to C?
So we do. It's still a battleface product, but we do have like the opportunity to white label. It really depends on jurisdiction. Like there are some places where, the product has to be sold as battleface, for example, but it could be something like, company A powered by battleface. We have to do a lot of different kind of combinations, and you have to stay within the lines of the law, right? Insurance is it's a heavily regulated industry, which kind of does limit some creativity, but it keeps it's a fair playing field for everybody, like who's in the space. So it is mostly as battle face, but you might not know you're buying our product through a third party sometimes in specific regions.
That's cool. So a lot of our listeners who do buy travel insurance are probably going to be seeing your branding, even if you're partnered with a different company in a market like Australia.
Yep.
So a company's grown a lot since being founded. I know your team now is over 30 engineers, and well, you're the co-founder from ground zero. So I'd love to hear some stories about how you've scaled your engineering organization.
Yep. So in the beginning, it was like I mentioned, it was just a couple of us. I think we were four or five pre-Series A. Once we got our Series A, the VC company we were working with kind of pushed really hard on growth, right? This was 2021, where basically you are being spearheaded to grow the company as fast as you can, provide as many products, get as many users, basically get as many sales as you can, and we'll figure out the rest later. And I think that was a big kind of mantra. And going into it, it was pretty daunting because most of the people we had were based out of Malta and we relocated to Columbus, Ohio, right? And so we didn't really know the market. It was a really hard time to hire people. Basically, it's where remote was, the main thing. Everybody was remote. People were getting jobs off the coast, so salaries were very competitive. So we were probably hiring at that time at least an engineer a week, and we did that for a while. There was a lot of interviews we did. What we were focused on originally, though, was just hiring kind of the most senior, smart people we could that were also really humble, right? Everybody was kind of mashed into one team while we tried to figure it all out and why we were growing. And again, like we had our engineers who were here already. So we had those four or five kind of trying to teach everybody the code base and trying to come up with how we're going to build and scale because we were moving off a monolith into the microservice architecture. And those engineers were still building things that were required to keep the company afloat and, to keep developing new things and keep growing sales. So it was actually one of the most fun times, to be honest with you, where you have that kind of hyper growth and all you're doing is, adding to the team and building new things and figuring out, 100 problems a day while 200 more crop up. But yeah, I think now we're in a pretty stable state now. We've got around 4 or 5 engineering teams, like product engineering teams, and we've got a DevOps team and some QA, and we're split out across Malta and the US,
Hmm, that's
EU
awesome.
and US, I'd say.
Hmm. As far as I know you have staff engineers on your team. How do you
Mhm.
look at the career ladders between technical and non-technical tracks in your teams?
So most of the people we have are technical, right? And I think we really we hired people who love to code. That was a big part of it too. We needed people who get their hands dirty, right, every day. And we do have some people who fall more into like your traditional people managers or architects, right? But I'd say at some point or another, they're all coding throughout the day. Um, our teams are mostly split. Like we've got a lead engineer who, mostly works with the product and, he's mentoring and helping out. But then the staff engineer is really that right-hand man or right-hand person that gets things done, right? Um, they're really influential in the team. They're probably the go-to for the bigger projects or the bigger issues that need to be solved. And I think we've got a really great combination of individuals who work as a team. And, I couldn't be happier with the leads and staff engineers that we have.
Hmm, that's great. I was talking with um, a team member earlier this week, and I think that it's common in tech companies for the best engineers to get forced into people management roles, and we don't always look at it as the complete career transition that it is. And I always appreciate when I hear somebody with staff engineers on the team. That keeps the best folks on the team, and it also keeps the best folks doing good work. We have plenty of managers out there, but I think the best engineers are more difficult to come by.
I mean, I understand everybody kind of wants to progress, and it's good to have different levels of it, right? Because nobody wants to be in the same position doing the same thing every day. And I think, increased responsibility and things like that. We're human by nature, right? Like we're always going to want to do more. At least most people do. They want to do more, they want to grow. And I think tech is one of those places where it's great because it's true. You don't just have to become a people manager to grow in your role. You can become an expert in a certain technology. You can become the go-to person um, for a specific, like you can become an SME on a specific topic. And, you know, this is why I've always kind of loved tech. It's these different avenues that you have for growth you know, and we're still a startup, so it's really all hands on deck. So we have everybody doing everything on certain days. There's people running scripts, there's people who doing help desk if they have to. So I think that's also a big part of how we hired and the people we have is that they're just ready to kind of help out in any way they can. And, having that track to know that they can grow and progress and, you know, get more out of their day to day, I think is super important.
I am a big believer in engineering management should have been technical at some point in the past. It's taking some business operations manager and being like, hey, run this software engineering team. That hasn't really ever made sense in my world.
I'd say the same. I don't think I've ever seen that work once, but I've seen a lot of places where that happens, where they have like a manager or something, and then they have technical resources report up. But I think if that person's not able to guide kind of through the experiences they've been through, it'll be a struggle.
What are some of the more interesting things you're working on right now? And it doesn't have to be in your organization, but I have to imagine you have some new scaling problems at your current stage.
So obviously there's the AI stuff, right? Cliche, I know. But what we've been doing is how do we enhance individuals through AI, right? This isn't just for the customer experience. We're looking inwards a lot. Basic things like think of, I don't know, PRs are being reviewed by AI before a human gets to them, right? Summarizing what it thinks could be potential issues or, writing tests, for example, writing the unit tests or helping out the day to day. A lot of what we're looking at is how can a person go from doing 10 things a day to 100,
Mm,
right? And, we're not talking about, driving people into the ground and, blood, sweat, and tears. What we're talking about is just making everybody more efficient. Obviously, from the other side, we do some AI stuff that's helping out our customers, but the real focus that we do is internal right now. And we think that is a differentiator moving forward. Kind of, how do you scale? Because people are, it's the unfortunate truth that, the most expensive resource most companies have at the moment is probably their staff, right? And it's a great investment to have into. But you have to do it within means. And I think AI is really going to be crucial in that piece of how we grow and how we scale. Um, but yeah, that's kind of our biggest challenge right now for scaling.
I really like that context that you shared, where helping people do more. So go from 10 things a day to 100 things a day. As an executive and a leader in my company, I'm every day I'm thinking about, should I be doing this? Does it add value?
Yep.
Can I delegate it? If
Yep.
I can't delegate it, who can I hire? Should I hire? It's all
Yep.
about scaling the things I do, and frequently that's through people. But being technologists and being in technology companies, well, looking at how, again, we can scale ourselves as people, but using tech.
Yep.
In my company, we have very limited admin people. Think business admin, accounting and finance, and the reason why it's mostly automated. And those who are that an accounting and finance professional, we have doing higher level, higher impact work as opposed to just clicking categories and things. And the 100 task a day engineer.
One day, right? One day we'll get a 100-day task engineer. But I mean, that's really where it's at. It's how do we get rid of those menial tasks, right? Like do people actually need to be thinking about these things, right? And we don't have to look at it as simple automation anymore. There are models and things out there that are complex enough to really do these jobs at a high level. And we go from it from our customer service team to our engineering team to underwriting. Like we're looking at all aspects of it, and we've got some pretty cool POCs out there right now that we're working through and testing and kind of improving on. But I think a lot of how we're going to grow, and I think everybody probably saw that Shopify memo last week or the week before. It was like, before you hire somebody or before you scale, like, why can't AI do it, or why can't a tool be built to do this? And that's going to be a big part of our mantra as well moving forward.
Yeah, I think we're going through a transition now because I really look at current gen AI as a paradigm shift. Think the internet was a paradigm shift, right? And we've had a lot of major technology changes along the way. Thin client, thick client, proliferation of bandwidth, allowing us to do amazing things on mobile devices. That and compute, having multiple gigahertz processors on a pocket computer. But
Yep.
so lots of tech changes, but I think we've been operating in the same paradigm for a while, and Gen AI being that paradigm shift. But I looked at, well, coding is, we created a language to help humans tell computers how to work. So
Yep.
programming was created to be a human interface to computers. And now our latest technology we're using to help us be more efficient at that human. So we haven't quite jumped past to the new paradigm yet, but that's what I'm always looking at.
Yep. So we're getting closer and closer, right? Like what we see being done with like natural language processing has become, far beyond what was possible just a few years ago, right? There are times where you call in, we're getting demos for example, for phone agents, right? And you would not be able to tell the difference anymore. And, that's a combination of all these technologies we're talking about. And it's like you start thinking what's possible in the next 2 or 3 years. And it's both terrifying and great, but it's like you said, like it's a paradigm shift now. And I think it has to be at the forefront of everything you do. And again, I know it's cliche to be talking about AI on tech podcasts, but it's hard to avoid the subject as well.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, admittedly, being a technologist, I often avoid being buzzword compliant because it's not unusual to just be a latest marketing thing. But I do think when it comes to AI and those who are applying it, which is almost all of us right now, it's difficult to avoid this subject. I'm curious, it seems like you're pretty far along the adoption curve. What are some of the more impactful things you're seeing in your engineering teams? Are you using Cursor? What are you doing?
So we've got a combination. Some people prefer Cursor, some are using GitHub Copilot. It really depends on user preference, just like an IDE almost, right? I mean, Cursor is an IDE, but you know what I mean. And I think it's the smaller tools that we're building that are making a difference. It's just so easy to connect and um, put context into Gen AI, right? And be able to get results out of it quickly. Um, like I said, like just even the PR process stuff has been excellent. Like it takes away, a lot of the mental capacity you need to go through lines of codes where you get summarizations and you get things already pointed out for you that, you should be reviewing before it goes to somebody else or, um, you know, the test cases, right? Like things to actually be looking out for. And it's what we've seen, like and I think it's a generic number is like everybody's looking for that 25% increase right now. But if you're using it right, I think you can go way beyond that.
Hmm. The something that I've been super sensitive to from a security perspective is uh, people are often a weak link, and we all see phishing in all its form every day.
Yep.
And the level of human imitating AI generation is just come so far between deepfakes and audio, right? And we can easily emulate people's voices. So a lot of the controls we've used before can't be
Yep.
trusted as easily, right? If we're walking across the office to make sure the email we got is our coworker and not a fake one, we can be pretty confident if we're looking to someone face to face. But we can't necessarily be as confident if we're doing a Zoom call with someone, and we have to be extra vigilant now. And the startup, I don't hear many people talking about. In fact, it's probably a misnomer to call it startup. It's just so well funded. Sam Altman of OpenAI founded another startup called Tools for Humanity, and its main purpose is to prove that people are people. And
Yeah.
it's interesting. I think it's something we really need to solve. Like right now, I'm just thinking very tactically, how can we empower organizations to make responsible decisions day to day?
A lot of it comes down, from our end at least, it comes down to really policies, procedures, and training. There's nothing else to really do, right? Like you should call back the individual, like they know, you know, that the CEO is not texting them to get them a Target gift card, or what's it called? We've actually had that case where people are getting mass spammed, pretending to be our CEO or COO or whoever asking for, some kind of money, like, hey, quick, I'm in a meeting. And now you add that element of voice, which is even more kind of hard to deny, right? But the only way you really get around it right now is through just training and, hang up on that call the person back on a number is right. And does everybody do it? No, right? And I think that's where these tools are going to be invaluable. And the technology to prevent it is really lacking behind the technology to be able to scam someone.
And cool thing too is it's we've used tech to solve boring problems for a long time. Data entry used to be very common in
Yep.
business, and we don't do data entry anymore. And with Gen AI, where the examples you provided, doing code reviews, I've never met a single engineer who got really excited about doing code reviews.
Yep.
The good ones would understand the value and play along to the work, but it's not what they wake up and get excited to do every day.
I think there's also a level of trust you establish, like two people who are, both very senior might just trust the work. Do you know what I mean? And might not do as thorough as a job or everybody's overwhelmed, but we need to release a feature, right? And that's kind of where it helps, where it's, you know, not mentally impactful. It's not, time consuming. It's something that's quick. It's summarization of things. I mean, anything you can really do to make like tasks like that people don't want to do, and you can make them quick or, a lot faster or completely done for you. I think that's where there's going to be a lot of gain and a lot of wins.
Hmm. Do you see, and either do you see your current engineering team members' job descriptions or skill requirements changing? Or alternatively, are you starting to hire different technical roles than you were before? Like, just to illustrate, LLM engineer, right? How do you see that affecting your organization?
So at the moment, no, right? At the moment, I think it's hard to say. Like you do have some experts in the field, but I mean, it's pretty much a new technology, right? We're talking last 3, 4 years, right? Where people are really actively super invested into it. Um, we still kind of hire the smartest people we can find. That's something we always try and do. It's people who can solve problems, people who can kind of, do things that they might not be expected to do and don't, do it without complaining. That's really where we focus. It hasn't changed yet, but I do foresee it coming. There's going to be a point where, you have to think outside the box, where it's not just putting your head down and writing code. It's bouncing ideas off the AI. It's how can I not have to ever do this again, right? It's those things that we kind of think of already as engineers, but to another level now, because it's like you have a little assistant with you everywhere you go, right? And it's doing a lot of the menial stuff that you don't want to do. And we're not there yet for hiring differently, but I see it coming.
Hmm.
Have you guys
Cool.
started yet, or is it something that?
Yeah, and we've been doing R&D with GenAI for a couple years. First initiative was a proof of concept for a local LLM. And it's funny, it's been moving so quickly. The thing we built was so rudimentary. The feature at the time, OpenAI added a week before just blew it out of the water. I look at a prototype versus minimum viable product, and I think the market is shifting so quickly. I've not seen tech move this fast before. Like the early days of the internet were fast, but this is a whole new speed.
Yep,
So I think there's a lot of business operations benefit and opportunity there. Being able to tackle non-deterministic problems is suddenly easier. The big piles of unstructured data we kept but didn't really know what to do with because of the amount of time it would take a human to make it useful. Well,
yep,
now we have a tool to make it useful, so that stuff's great. A lot of the products we built, because it's been shifting so quickly, it's I don't look at them as something I'd take to market. It's like, well, even if we take this to market, the market probably won't be there in 18 months,
yep.
but it does deliver a lot of value internally and for our clients. And that's what a lot of the things we built have, where they provided value to date.
Yep. Yeah, it is lightning speed. It's what you know today is irrelevant tomorrow almost, right? I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, like you're saying.
Yeah, something that I wrestle with and is well, everything we do, I want to provide value. So that's a pretty superficial thing. Most people would agree with that. Well, a lot of things we do as humans and the processes we use provided value as is, right? We might write a report because it's a distillation of days or hours or a bunch of effort and conversations and research. And so it's almost an intellectual exercise and a communication exercise so we can share. And not to suggest we need to create reports, but just to illustrate the point. So if the exercise is to go directly to LLM and have it generate the report, I don't want that report. I don't want to read it. I have no interest in it. And I so when I'm doing work, that's how I think of it. And I when we work internally as a company, I think of it that way too. It's like if these are things we are doing as humans and it's adding value, just cranking out an artifact is not the value. So being a little more thoughtful about it. I I don't have anything solved. These are things I think about every day. It's just like what's the right way to interact in the world now with these new tools we have? We don't know. We're figuring it out, right?
And I think that's the cool thing, right? It's the different kinds of applications you can do, and it's hard to get out of the box of, oh, I'm just going to automate something, right? It's can I infer, decisions from the data that's there that I couldn't before because it was too big? Can I build something that I would have never thought of? Where I think before we were always thinking of we're going to build a tool or we're going to build a report and then we're going to do, something with that, right? And now it's you can almost do the A to Z with it where it can go in, do that process. It can go in and, you know, make decisions and process information and come up with stuff that's actually useful as an end goal versus having to go through an entire flow. So that's kind of where we have to figure out, like, how are we going to use it? What's going to happen in, the next, I want to say 3 or 4 years, but the reality is next 3 or 4 months at the rate we're going, right? So yeah, it's definitely a cool place to be in right now.
One thing that does get me excited though is humans doing less low value activities, right?
Yep.
Because, well, change always has a lot of complexity, but I don't want to do low value things, and this is another tool so we don't have to.
I mean, that's why a lot of high level like execs have personal assistants, right? But now this is a thing that's accessible to everyone. And I think that's going to be a game changer.
So true. Well, thanks so much for being here today, Tony. Do you have any closing thoughts for our audience today?
No, just, keep inventing things, keep an open mind. And yeah, that's it really.
Well, great. Thank you all for listening to Project Gamma, presented by GammaForce.io. If you've enjoyed this podcast, check us out on your favorite podcast platform to catch future episodes. Take care.